Hey nerds, we are talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi Part 3. We are going to do a spoiler-free review of the episode, and then we are going to get into a full spoiler breakdown of the episode, starting now. Welcome to the Nerd Social. I am Nathan.
Hello there, I am Priya.
And I'm Colin.
Hey, so if you want to jump ahead to our spoiler portion of the conversation, we'll have chapter information below. So the Disney Plus description of this episode is Obi-Wan searches for allies. There's a little bit longer IMDb version of this description, which is Obi-Wan searches for allies as he attracts the attention of the Empire, threatening the locals. So Priya, what did you think of this episode? Spoiler free, of course.
I actually really enjoyed the episode. It was a lot faster than the first two. They really picked the pace up, but they also did a really good job of unraveling the plot through some really kind of tender moments and focusing on the emotional bonds between the different characters. I think it also adds a lot more tension, which is really great to see after the first two episodes, and it ups the stakes in a really interesting way. So kind of that halfway through the show now, I think it's really clear the direction they're going, and we're seeing some more of the character arcs. So I'm really excited to see where they're going to go after this.
Colin, what do you think?
Yeah, so I definitely having had the experience of watching the couple of Disney Plus shows, and we've reviewed the Book of Boba Fett as well. I knew straight off the top, that they're going to go slow. They're always going to go slow for the first couple of episodes, but I didn't expect that they were going to go really pick up the pace, as what Priya just said, pick up the pace with episode 3 like that this quickly. And it does make sense to a certain degree because there are only 6 episodes, so they are going to accelerate that pace quite a bit, but it was definitely a little bit jarring in some ways because of the fact that they just hit the gas pedal, just like vroom right there. And you saw it from the end of episode 2 that it was going to be some stuff is going to happen. And so for me, it was definitely very action-packed, really great big reveals, and I felt really satisfied about the episode, and I think it's definitely the best one so far out of the 3. So that's just my initial thoughts overall.
Yeah, I like the episode too. I think I agree with you. It's my favorite out of the last 3. I expected them to be slower in some reveals, so it was really surprising to see what they decided to do in this episode. I think we're getting some great performances out of Ewan McGregor. He's, as we saw in the last couple episodes, showing how much different this Obi-Wan is from the one that we saw in the prequels, and bridging the gap between the prequel Obi-Wan and the one that we'll see in The New Hope, but also showing that he's a broken man, a bitter man as well. There's some points in this episode where we see him some bitterness, and there are some specific points to why he's bitter that haven't been explored in the past that we can get into when we talk spoilers. And it's not just what you would expect, specifically the fall of the Jedi Order, and that of course plays into it, but there are some other things that I think that he hints about in this episode that also maybe is playing into his bitterness in a sense of regret. So I appreciated that, and we get a few new characters in this episode, which add to the ensemble of interesting characters that we've had over the last couple episodes. And I think that the actress playing Leia is also doing, again, a really good job. I think she's been getting some feedback from fans over the last couple days. Unfortunately, several portions of the cast are getting some interesting feedback, and interesting is a euphemism for some.
Interesting is a nice of a way of putting it.
Some toxic feedback from people who call themselves fans. Specifically, Moses Ingram, who is also doing a great job, has been getting some terrible racist responses about her performance. Disney and Star Wars responded to that hate, and with basically pushing back. They have a message that they put on their Twitter account that I can zoom in on. I'll try to zoom in on here, that speaks to the hate that she's been receiving, and also pushes back at those people who call themselves fans, are mostly just man babies in their basements yelling at people.
McGregor had made a video like in his car as well. He was kind of like, "You're not a fan. You're really not." And it's sad that this day and age that still needs to happen. You need to hear it from like the lead character and an executive producer that you don't have a problem with aliens, but you have a problem with people of color.
It's not just sad. Unfortunately, it was predictable because this is not the first time this has happened. This happened with Daisy Ridley, Kelly Marie Tran, all the way back to the prequels. There were some toxic fans who made Hayden Christensen's life terrible. The kid who played Anakin as a child.
Jake Lloyd. Ahmed Best.
Huh?
Ahmed Best, who played Jar Jar Binks.
Yeah, he actually had a story about how he almost committed suicide. So like this fandoms, the people who are fans who feel like this franchise belongs to them, and they have a sense of entitlement and don't understand. We love this stuff and we enjoy this stuff, but it's fiction. It's not like a holy text. It's not. People are taking this stuff too seriously, and honestly, the people who are saying racist things, the situation or Disney's decisions aren't making you racist. You're already racist, and this is just showing who you are. So yeah, it's been an interesting couple of days. When Priya and I did the review on Sunday, I wasn't even aware this was happening, but I should have known that it was happening.
Yeah, it is very unfortunate, and I think that honestly, I think Moses Ingram's character Reva is wholly compelling.
Yeah.
Like out of the first 2 episodes, she was the most compelling character out of all of them. I was enthralled. I was just like, sign me up for more, because it's her delivery, her menacing demeanor, her just straight up like, and you got some background as to like how she became an Inquisitor, but at the same time, it was just like, wow, just that presence was just there, and it's just so great, and she just owned that role. I think if you saw The Mandalorian with Moff Gideon and Giancarlo Esposito, he was very menacing, but I just think that Mrs. Ingram's even better. I think so. I think that she's even better than Giancarlo, and Giancarlo's a spastic great actor.
I think what they're trying to do is showing sort of her mirroring Vader a little bit. So we can get into this when we actually get into some of the spoiler talk of this episode. But yeah, I think that's what they're trying to do. Like the Moff is more of a military person, where she is, I'm not sure if you would really call her a Padawan, but she is an Inquisitor who is a disciple of Vader. So yeah, that ruthlessness is very much present.
It's interesting you say she's like the shadow of Vader, because even in the first couple of episodes, her first shot, I was like, her costume reminds me a bit of Vader, because it's so sleek and plain, and with the black kind of details, it did remind me a lot of Vader's costume when she first came on screen too. So I do think they're trying to make that parallel there, and especially as we talked last time with her character, I agree, Colin. I think there's so much intrigue around her character, and there's so much questions around her character because of her backstory. So I think it's a really interesting character, and we get a little bit more, maybe not as much as we thought we would, but we do get a little bit more insight in this episode as well to really see some of her connections and her really amazing process. I wish I could like her.
Yes, and just
I don't know if she's like place, right time, or if she's just like an amazing thinker.
Yeah, just
Probably
one more thing is that, just before we get into spoilers, they try to do this with Captain Phasma, but it was almost like a joke and made her out to be a joke, unfortunately. So I think that they're trying to compensate for some of the mistakes that they made with the sequels. Hopefully they're trying to make her just as compelling, and borrowing from the well of Filoni and Favreau in some ways, mostly Filoni, because the Inquisitors were based from the Rebel series of the cartoon series on Disney Channel.
Yeah, Captain Phasma started off well. So I liked Last Jedi more than most people do. I think it was a thing that Rian Johnson
I think so.
did.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah, for some reason they decided to undo it altogether and say, psych, we didn't believe in any of his choices in the last movie. One thing I didn't like is he squandered Phasma in the fight. Like, that's the one criticism that I could have on that movie. But like everything else in that movie, the decisions that he made, it opened it up to all kinds of possibilities, and they decided to just have Rey related to Palpatine, which, whatever. Anyway. Yeah.
Let's not go into the
Last
review
Jedi,
of the
because
last
there are
one.
some feelings that I have too, but
Yeah.
some positive, mostly positive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into this spoiler talk. Actually, before we do that, one other thing is about the Moses Ingram thing. So we're getting some cross-universe love. So Anton Mount from the new Star Trek Strange New Worlds show also put a message out on Instagram showing support for Moses, and I think Malgru from Voyager also responded. Yeah, you can see Kate Malgru said you have a support of all the captains, and there was also a retweet by Star Trek on Paramount Plus. So yeah, unfortunately, this is not something that is just in the Star Wars universe. This is something that has happened as well in the Star Trek universe.
Yes.
Typically not as vitriolic, but Sinead Martin Green has gotten some crap over the years and things like that. Yeah, unfortunately, this is a terrible part of fandom that we don't like, and part of the reason why we started this channel to have a more variety of voices out on the internet talking about these things.
Absolutely.
With that said, if you are enjoying the conversation, please join the conversation by commenting down below. We usually do this live, and you can join us on Wednesdays at 8:30 Eastern Time to join the conversation live. I would also say that we're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the summer, so you can help us out and help us grow our channel and have more diverse points of view like you're seeing right now, expand our network. So subscribe, like, and comment. We really appreciate it. It helps the channel. So with that, what I should say is, if you haven't seen the episode, we are going to spoil the heck out of the episode now, so please go watch the episode and then come back and watch the rest of the review. Spoilers ahead. Alright, what do you guys want to talk about specifically? Do you want to go in chronological order? We don't have to go through every single... The Vader fight at the end? Yeah.
Start at the end, but I just think like you...
So the episode does start with Vader.
Yep.
The episode starts with Obi-Wan on the transport, like in his head, trying to call out to Qui-Gon, and then Qui-Gon doesn't answer, and then they do a cut to Vader. So I can actually go there. So he's on the transport here, and he says, yeah, and Vader being put together with this suit. And you can see how painful it is to him. So I think this is the first time they showed you that the chest plate has like spikes that are going into his body.
Yeah, and he does, and every single time it's going to happen that way. And also, this scene actually reminds me, I don't want to spoil it for Priya because she probably hasn't watched the animated series, but there's a scene that's in the animated show in Rebels that's very similar to this scene. I'm just going to leave it at that, but yeah, it's very similar to it. And then, but yeah, this was so revealing in a lot of ways because we never seen Vader in this way, because we've only seen some parts of him like burned to crisp. In episode 3 we saw that, we saw the beginnings of it, we saw him getting put into becoming the machine, becoming Vader, but we also saw some of it in Rogue One with the reveal, with the dad joke at the end. This is like really deep, that you saw the scars, you saw the machinery that coming in, the arms and the legs. So he's a very damaged individual and just like living on Mustafar, basically. We saw Mustafar again.
So what you get, there's far more detail here than there was in Revenge of the Sith. But what you, and with the detail, what you can see is that he's always in pain, which is probably why he's always pissed off all the time. He's probably always in, which is probably why he's so vengeful and so cold and bitter, and why like killing people is nothing to him.
Yeah, I just also think we know what Vader looks like at the end. We've seen the costume and he's iconic, but I think just to see it all come together, like it still gave me chills when he came, like it's just such an ominous presence. And then I was floored when it's like James Earl Jones. I'm like, all right, got me now. It's the way that they're really able to establish his presence or re-establish his presence. It just turned up the notch of the episode off the bat, because it's such an iconic character, and then you bring James Earl Jones, or I guess it's like a Titan version of him, because he was credited at the end, so I'm like, I think it was him. 91 years old, it's still sounding the same.
On his voice, because his voice, of course, is different than it was in the 70s, but I think it is him. I think they just normalized it so it would sound more similar to the way that it sounded in the 70s, but I think it was him performing the lines.
I think you're correct on that, because if you hear him in Rogue One, it sounded like a much older version of James Earl Jones. If you just hear it from him, all the lines that he delivered in Rogue One was like an older version of him, but this sounded like 1977 James Earl Jones Star Wars, like episode 4. It sounded like him. It was very menacing. Or even Empire Strikes Back, where he was like, "We meet again at last, Obi-Wan," and all those lines, those iconic lines that he delivers to Luke or to Obi-Wan. And it's just, wow, it's back with a vengeance.
Yeah. So they definitely, that opening scene was a good way to set the tone. Making sure his voice was exactly the right pitch, was a way to set the tone. But also when he actually shows up on Mapuza and he walks down the street. So the first thing that you see actually is these people, his Inquisitors, avert their gaze. Like they don't want to look at him directly, because he could just go off on them and kill them just because they're looking at him. They both look down. They both look down and look away as he enters the frame. And yeah, as I said, he's walking down the street. He senses Obi-Wan, and based upon his experience with him as Anakin, he just starts killing people to try to get him to come out. So yeah, this is just like the corridor scene in Rogue One, but it's very similar to the corridor scene in Rogue One. He's not wrecking as many people, but he's definitely making a point.
This was definitely, I would say, much more menacing than that, because though that scene is definitely very iconic as well, but this was definitely more menacing. It again increases I wouldn't want to say it increases the fear factor. It's more like an intimidation type of thing, and also you knew, and you know how, like what Priya said, he's cold-blooded, like completely cold. Like these are innocent people most likely, whereas the Rebel Alliance is like, okay, you're actually fighting against him. They have no shot, so it's a different type of dynamic.
Yeah, these are civilians, and these are not even civilians that are fighting against him in any way. And he's using them as pawns to lure Obi-Wan out. That's the value of their lives to him is like nothing, because he's just playing with them basically. Yeah,
and I think it hits Obi-Wan probably the hardest, because this is, I guess, in theory, the first time he's seeing Anakin since Mustafar. So he already knew he obviously turned the dark side, but I think how cold and just to the lowest point that he's become, it's so clear from this scene. And I have to say kudos to Hayden Christensen to just get the the movement of Vader, and even like the grips. It's the small details like that, and I know people gave him a lot. He got when he was in the originals, but there was excitement. Yeah, but there was so much excitement with him coming back, and like now with even James Earl Jones doing the voice, I think he's doing testament to like the physicality that Vader brings, because he's entirely in costume. So I do have to give him props for being able to like bring that presence when from head to toe. I think he's done a great job to capture the mannerisms and that really foreboding fear that Vader brings to scene.
I mean that scene at the end of episode 2 was chilling. It was like he opened his eyes and holy, it's the yellow eyes, it's the yellow Sith eyes, and I'm like, oh gosh, we're in for a lot of trouble. He's now like functional. Oh my gosh.
So what did you guys think of the lightsabers battle after this? So there are a couple beats here. There's Obi-Wan running away from him because he doesn't want to face him, because he's, as I said in the spoiler-free section, he's a diminished man. This was actually pretty cool. We have screenshots and not the video. Mike puts a video in the final edit. But this scene where he's just extending the lightsaber and the sound buzzes and you get to see his hand, it was very ominous. It was beautiful. It was beautifully lit. This is a really great job by the director, Deborah Chow. The lighting them both by lightsaber in the middle of the night. There's just some beautiful shots here. So he runs at first, and then he lights up his lightsaber, and then he's just lit. They're both lit by their sabers. So this was actually the image that I used for a thumbnail, because it's a beautiful shot. These are beautiful shots. But you also see he's bewilderedly like looking in the dark.
And he was also very hesitant to even, because he doesn't want to strike first, and he obviously is meeting his fallen brother after 10 years. But I agree, Nathan. I think this scene just completely took my breath away. I think it's such a sweet spot between the classic trilogies, where it is just like the red and blue just coming together, and it's like the far shot when everything's dark and always the two sabers, and then also the prequels, which really did a lot more than just the basic 1-2 duck and cover kind of fight. So I think it really hit a sweet spot. I think it was like the right level of intensity, because you can really see difference of levels of the two fighters. But I do think this was like peak Star Wars fight duel that was promised, which was very surprising that in episode 3.
Right. The other thing that she does here to make him look menacing. So I think Obi-Wan, previous to this, he's looking around thinking that he's going to jump out at him. So he's moving a lot slower now because all of his limbs are robotic. So he's not moving like Anakin from the prequels. He doesn't have to. He's a tank now. So out in the distance, you just see the lights get closer and closer. And you see the lights on his chest. So it's like a shark or that's coming to hunt you. And so it was a good shot. It was staged. Some people are complaining about this when they actually start fighting, but I mean, I liked it. I don't know what you guys thought.
I think for me, I think that you have to understand the timeline as well, because we've already 10 years removed from episode 3. Obi-Wan was like peak Obi-Wan and peak Anakin was. It was a very passionate fight, like a long lightsaber duel between the two. And obviously Obi-Wan has diminished his use of the Force because of the fact that he needs to hide from
that,
the
and also
Empire.
he's disillusioned and bitter.
And exactly. Very similar to how Luke felt in Last Jedi, just to allude to The Last Jedi. Very similar to that, where he's not really using the Force as much, and he's really hiding the fact that he doesn't have a lightsaber. But I think that hopefully in the next few episodes, we might even get a time jump where you might be to a point where you're going to see maybe close to Alec Guinness Obi-Wan, where he's like the wiser old man. He doesn't need to necessarily fight in order to I don't know whether or not they're going to get to that point but you can see that he's still lost.
I think there's definitely going to be another duel. Like Vader's throwing him around like a rag doll. He says right here, the years have made you weak. At a certain point, I think when he came to this fight, when Anakin came to this fight, when Vader came to this fight, he didn't know what to expect. And when he realized how he is, he started to toy with him like a cat and a mouse, throwing him around and everything. Yeah, and
it's so clear now. Sorry, Nathan, but it's so clear Vader's motivation throughout this fight, and then even at the end when he lights that fire, he wants Obi-Wan to be right. He wants Obi-Wan to suffer like he suffered, and it's that centrality of Obi-Wan comes out so naturally in the sense he is the one that's driven Vader's hate, and there's also seeds in the episode that he's the one kind of fostering Leia's rebellion and Leia's hope. You can see that he's fostering that, and he's also clearly fostered Vader's hate. So I love kind of the centrality of that, because it really bridges that gap really well between episodes 3 and 4.
And people thought that Rogue One did a very good job of bridging towards the end, bridging right into A New Hope. But as you've seen so far, it looks pretty good in terms of bridging episode 3, the end of episode 3, into an epilogue of episode 3 in a lot of ways, and the rise of Darth Vader into this menacing character that we see at the end of Rogue One, or because we're still about 10 or so years off from that part of the timeline. It is definitely a dark time for anybody that would want to go against the Empire right now, and these episodes are showing that. And when I was younger, I was always intrigued about the in between 3 and 4. They showed Rebels, they showed a couple of other things, but this really does bring it home in a lot of ways. Where this is actually fantasy becoming reality. It's, oh my gosh, the fanboy in me is, oh my gosh, this is actually happening. I can't believe this is happening. Filling in those gaps.
Yeah, as you get, sorry, go ahead.
No, just one last point on the duel fight. At one point, I know Obi-Wan's going to be fine, but I definitely feared a few seconds. It reminded me a bit of the Reichenbach Falls from Sherlock Holmes, just the setting and everything. But I think I did fear for Obi-Wan for a bit. But
yeah, he's brutal with him though. He's he wants him to suffer the same way that he suffered. So it didn't occur to me until this exact moment why they set this episode on this mining planet. So they set this episode on this mining planet specifically so they could do this scene right here. He puts this ore on the ground to burn Obi-Wan. And I guess this doesn't necessarily destroy canon, because Allen Guinness had a robe on the entire time, so he could have had a burnt arm. So yeah.
And also it could be healed.
Maybe
he wasn't burned that bad. It wasn't
maybe Bale is going to give him a back.
We saw in Boba Fett as well, so it's
I guess no one has injuries as bad as Anakin's injuries. He was almost consumed by a volcano. What did you guys think? So there was a couple things here. I didn't give my rating at the beginning, but I think I would give this episode an 8. There are a couple things here that were nonsensical, and Priya and I were talking about this on Sunday, where they just make decisions as the writing team because they want the character to go to the next step. So when Haja was cornered by Reva and she didn't kill him, it's because Haja is going to show up again. Here,
and it's Camille, Johnny. You can't kill him.
Yeah, they should have wrote something better so that it made sense why she didn't kill him. And here again, after burning him, Layla, I think is her name, is the
Tala. Not Layla. Layla's Moon Knight.
Yeah, sorry. Tala shoots one of the stormtroopers here, and then shoots some of the machinery, which makes a giant fireball. Now, granted, this is larger than the one that Vader made, but he just put the fire out with the Force. So it doesn't make any sense whatsoever that he couldn't just put the fire out again, and that very slow-moving droid could have gotten him out of there before he put the fire out. So again, this is just like convenience from the writer's point of view. Yeah. This is a small nitpick, but it made no sense in the moment to me.
But he was shocked. He was shocked that happened. He probably thought that, hey, I'm gonna have my revenge finally, and then what's going on? What's going on? So it's like that. It's it's like a Robot Chicken moment. If you have you seen Robot Chicken, the stop motion animation, which they do a lot. They do a lot of Star Wars parodies, and so it's like, what's going on? So you can definitely have them do like a parody of this and say what is going on here?
It's probably just like
he's like this. What the hell?
I get your point, Nathan, because I was like, wait, he just made.
That's the other thing. Like he could have just picked Obi-Wan up and pulled him over the fire again. He could have pulled him over the fire, through the fire. But like just before she does this, he specifically puts the fire out and tells them to go collect him. So like I said, the fire's bigger. Yes.
Yeah.
And also he might have. Yeah.
I'm gonna let him have the moment. I'm gonna be like he was there.
That shot right here is probably that he feels traumatic. He's traumatized. Think about it. He's been burned.
That's the other thing people say. Like when he has a fear of fire because of what happened to him. But if they were building me a suit and I just had a stump for a body, I feel like fireproof pants would be like a demand that they put in my suit.
I don't know.
If I have a stump for a body because I was burnt by lava, I want fireproof pants. I don't know.
Yeah. Look at his expression. I'm dumbfounded. Like I don't know what to do now. Retreat. Yeah.
It's one of those things. Also, like in episode 4, after he has the fight with Obi-Wan and he knocks him down, and the Luke, Han, and Leia are getting away. Like the doors close and he can't just open the doors and go after them. It's just just the moment.
She's shot. He's like, what the hell?
All right. So other things actually happened in this episode. I mean, do you guys anything else you want to talk about the fight?
I do. The one thing with this, just because you were talking about Tala, I totally thought that she was like gonna run into Reva.
I think what Reva did, the way that they shot this, it looked like Reva went down that hall, and she didn't. It looked like she went to the end of the tunnel, killed the guy, so that when Leia got to the end of the tunnel, she was there. Yeah. So she figured out where the tunnel ended and killed her transport. So yeah.
Once again, amazing thinker. I was like, how did she know to go into that? Because the loader droid just came out, and then she figured out where the.
So we'll definitely see more Reva and also more Leia at the end of this episode, in the next episode, and I think we'll probably get some more backstory on Reva. And if not in the next episode, they have to do it in the 4th episode. I don't know if they're trying to do the Marvel thing by doing all the backstory in second to last episode. I think we're going to get some backstory. Yeah. There's a little bit of a spoiler for the future, but I am fairly certain that they have some flashback scenes coming up in the next couple episodes. They're going to have some flashback scenes with Anakin, and maybe those flashback scenes with Anakin will have her as a younger person. So
they were speculating I think there was one speculation online that she was in the Jedi Temple. There was like, oh, this person was a youngling. Oh yeah. That was one of the speculated things online. So that would be interesting if that is the case. And then also that there was some possible like former Jedi guards that might now are Inquisitors and things like that. So it was really fascinating to see.
The Grand Inquisitor is a former Jedi guard. He was the main guy that it looks like she killed last week, but he's likely not dead. His species has 2 stomachs apparently, and even people who don't have 2 stomachs like Fennec Shan have been able to recover from wounds like that.
Pretty much anyone after that.
I was going to say something that was going to be a spoiler for Clone Wars. So no, I'm not going to say that because I know you haven't seen Clone Wars. You should definitely see the show.
On my summer list.
So yeah, they brought people back from things worse than this, which I have actually have. In the recap, they actually have the show. So
yeah, but yeah, I want to actually go back to one other thing was when they were on the transport, when Leia and Obi-Wan was on the transport. That was actually very interesting in a lot of ways, because I was thinking, is he gonna do some Jedi mind trick? Come on.
It doesn't. So all these beats where you expect him to do this thing, but he's like a diminished man. So like actually Leia is a bit is more on the ball than he is. He says something that could have gotten them caught. He calls her Leia instead of Luma, even though that Luma was the story that they agreed upon. This is a bit of a side but her arriving to this base and like this walk, this is like the most like badass walk that I've seen in a while. She has the mean walk down.
She does. But I will say, just going back very quickly to the transporter, I actually love that interaction, that conversation to have with the parallels of the families, because you get to know stuff about Obi-Wan that you haven't heard before, the fact that like he has glimpses. Is his parents and his brother. And I was reading online that one of the early screenplays of Return of the Jedi, Uncle Owen was actually supposed to be Obi-Wan's brother. They go with that route, but I thought that was like really interesting. That was the original screenplay, was that Owen was actually Obi-Wan's brother. He wasn't actually related to the Skywalkers. But I love that conversation just because they bring Padme a lot, and I appreciate that because so much of the struggle has always been about Anakin. And I think I like the fact that they're making Padme's character very central to little Leia, who I agree, Nathan. I think the actor,
She does a great job there. She does a great job there, yeah.
So good in this episode. I do think of the stormtroopers as like, do you not know what a Jedi looks like?
He's just basically walking around dressed like a Jedi. I don't know. I guess Owen dressed like this.
I was hoping he was gonna do the whole "we are the two you're looking for."
Owen dressed like this in the first episode. He just didn't have the hood. He sort of dressed in this dressed down sort of way. He just didn't have a hood. Yeah. So I guess maybe lots of people in this universe dress like this. Super baggy robes. I don't know.
But one other thing about this is that I find it very fascinating is that, yes, he didn't do any Jedi mind tricks. We don't need any identification. Like, those lines are so iconic. These aren't the droids you're looking for. Like, you see that he's not there. And they talked about in a lot of the promotional stuff that this is a character study of Obi-Wan. And so we've seen him from the young, kind of ambitious Jedi Padawan to now a reluctant master, Jedi master, Jedi Knight, amazing Jedi Knight who fought in the Clone Wars, and to a diminished man. And he's now in the diminished man stage, and then becoming the wise. We haven't seen that progression from diminished man to the wise old sage that you saw in A New Hope, where he's just, oh yeah, these stormtroopers, no big deal. We're just going to wave him off. No worries. And he's just so confident. Yeah. He's just so confident and so within himself, and he's so at peace. And we saw, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but even in the cartoon series, you saw that type of Obi-Wan, which is he's just at peace with himself, and he's just like he really knows what he's doing, even though he's diminished as an old man. Now he's just like diminished.
Yeah, I will say, without spoiling the Clone Wars, it's interesting to see like how tragic this person's like life has been. Like, you saw him in The Phantom Menace as like a teenager, basically, and you saw his life. You saw the very highs that he had in his life. Where in the Clone Wars, he was a general, and he had this family this Jedi family. And this is what I was talking about when I mentioned the bitterness. This conversation that he has with her here, when he says that you remind me of your mother, and then they get out, and then he tells her a little bit about his life before, what he could remember, because he was taken as a youngling, and he remembers his brother, he remembers his parents. But I think he's bitter here because he gave up a lot to be a Jedi, but he gained a new family, and now that family's gone too. So now he's regretting. He was always a little bit more dogmatic and a little bit more of a stickler for the rules than Qui-Gon was. So it's likely that he never went back and saw his family. And he's regretting things like that. Like he's regretting that he was so much of a stickler to the rules, because the Jedi rules and their inflexibility about attachments was the downfall of them. If they were a little bit more flexible, Anakin wouldn't have had the problems that he had. And he might have been able to have a different life as well with his family, and also someone who shows up in the Clone Wars animated shows as well. So yeah, it's unfortunate, and you can see that he snaps at her earlier on in the episode when she suggests why would Haja lie. He snaps at her and said, "Not all people are good." He's a very bitter, broken man at this point. Yes.
Yeah, and I will say, I think something Colin said earlier, which I think kudos to the creative team, because we expect him to do certain things because of what we know Obi-Wan to become. So the fact that he doesn't do the Jedi mind tricks or doesn't use the Force, without doing that, it already tells us how diminished he is, because you expect him to do things like that. And so I think they've done such a good job of, without creating that atmosphere where you expect it to happen and then it doesn't happen, just creates that void. Like, it makes it so much clearer. And I do think like this whole, even in the fight scene, and I was thinking about the fact like how much he hates blasters later in his life. It's all about the blasters right now.
He couldn't get through this with his lightsaber. He probably, as bad a shot as stormtroopers usually are, he probably couldn't deflect all the shots if he needed to. With his lightsaber. He probably isn't fast enough anymore.
His redemption, but we haven't seen what his redemption looks like. It sets up a really good kind of story arc for his redemption into that kind of like mentor to Luke, and also to how he again is at peace. We see that broken man right now, but we know eventually he becomes that wise sage that basically figures stuff out and saves, and he is the hope that Leia was looking for when she became part of the Rebel Alliance. Seeing that is really a really good kind of progression of this character overall, and the nuances that they brought in over the course of this 40 years of in the movies and in the TV shows.
Yeah, and we get someone cut in half, even though it wasn't with a lightsaber as well.
That was a gag, I would say.
Do you think that was a gag? That's brutal.
That was such a gag.
You didn't think it was brutal? I don't know.
Brutal. It was a gag, and also I just was surprised they didn't put the Wilhelm scream in there.
Like, they sort of did. It was like it wasn't a Wilhelm scream, but it was very close. When he fell, he screams, and it sounds it's close to the Wilhelm scream.
It definitely felt slightly like almost like fan service because some fans see that.
The guy who betrays him here, this mole guy, is actually voiced by Zach Braff from
Scrubs.
From Scrubs, yeah.
So
it was like Zach Braff doing an impersonation, because lots of people thought it was Seth Rogen. Lots thought it was Seth Rogen, because Seth Rogen voices a lot of characters, and he was just doing basically Seth Rogen like thing impersonation.
Speaking of special appearances, I know that you probably did or did not mention this. Did we mention about the kidnapper in the first couple episodes? The kidnapper who kidnapped Leia. Do you know who that was?
Fleet. It was Fleet. Yeah. From I forget what the group is. Red Hot
Chili
And he was in Back to the Future too.
Yeah, he shows up in a lot of different things.
I had to play that in my mind. I'm like, oh yes, he was that funny guy in Back to the Future 2. Got fired.
So this is when they meet Tala, and this is played by Adira Varma, who I'm not sure if you guys watch Game of Thrones. She has a big part in that show. As I forget what her name is. Her last name is Sands. Hilarious Sands. Doesn't have a great fate at the end of that show. Yeah.
Not many people do on that show.
So that's so when you see her face show up, you think maybe she's going to be a bad guy, and then she's on their side. I think I actually looked this up. She is either a captain or a senior lieutenant. There are different charts online. Wikipedia says that her rank is a captain. So it's interesting to see that someone who with that high of a rank in the army, she's a captain in the army specifically because they're red signifies she's part of the army. It's interesting that someone who with such a high rank, she's not like a general or anything, but she's been in the commissioned officer for I guess a decade, and she's done some things that she regrets. So it's interesting, this character, and we're definitely going to see her in the next episode as well.
I think so. I also like how they just shifted the tone of the show, because it started off as like the Southwest kind of like Western feel, and then it's turned into like a heist / like Jedi Underground Railroad kind of scene, and then it just ended with the pure lightsaber duel. So I feel like they did so many types of genres just packed in the 40 minutes. So I did like the feels, and we got to see maybe 3 new locations if you think of the 2 fortresses being on separate planets. Because the first 2 episodes we saw Alderaan, we obviously saw Tatooine, and then we also saw, I can't remember the name of where. And then today we got to saw Mapuzo, and then Fortress Vader and Fortress Inquisitorius.
It's in one of the moons.
Amazing.
In the same. It's one of the moons that's in the same system as Mustafar, where Vader's palace is. Yeah, this is already a better show because we're not spending all our time in Tatooine. Better than Boba Fett anyway. So we got to see lots of different places. It doesn't make the universe seem very small like Boba Fett did. So that already has high marks. I think also by the midpoint, people were a little iffy on Boba Fett, whereas things have been ramping up. So this is a really good point for the show. But as you said, this is their take on the Underground Railroad, or the Empire always have been space Nazis. There was also smuggling like this out of Nazi occupied areas during World War II. So I think they're calling back to both of those things, trying to oppress people out of terrible situations.
Also immigration, I would say too. In some ways, it's an immigration story. In some ways, documenting people.
Yeah.
So Nathan, you stopped your image here, so I'm going to let you guys tell me about Quinlan, because I did read a little bit.
Quinlan is a character that shows up in Clone Wars. He shows up in one episode called Hunt for Zero the Hutt. He is a tracker. The way they designed him, he looks like a Native American. He's specifically attuned to Jedi power, where he can touch objects and see who has touched him in the past, and that's why he's such a great tracker. So Obi-Wan and Quinlan team up in this episode to go after Zero the Hutt. And actually, this episode has Cad Bane show up. And the last time we saw Cad Bane, of course, was was in Boba Fett. And Cad Bane, the reason that everyone was so excited about Cad Bane showing up is because Cad Bane went up against Quinlan and Obi-Wan, and he beat them and got away in this episode. That's how formidable Cad Bane is in that show. So yeah.
I hope that Reva becomes better than Cad Bane. And Cad Bane is like right up there in terms of all-time villains of Star Wars. But of course, Darth Vader's up there. I hope Reva's going to be like right up there as well.
I keep wondering if they're going to give Reva like a 180. I don't know. I think it would be...
I don't know. I feel like there are a couple ways that they could go with her. So a couple things. So Quinlan, hopefully Quinlan shows up at the end before the end of the season, just like Qui-Gon. So if we jump ahead to when Reva was in this room, when she figures out where they are, she notices something, and specifically what she notices is the symbol that someone carved into the wood, and that annoys her. That makes her angry, and I think it's more evidence that she was a Jedi. Like, and I think she blames Obi-Wan. She blames Obi-Wan, and she also blames Anakin. So there are suggestions that she's trying to curry favor with Vader just to be close to him so that she can try to kill Anakin. Like, maybe she's not necessarily evil. She's just as bitter. She's just bitter that her life was taken from her. So yeah, right here.
Yeah.
So it's a Star Killer from Force Unleashed. If you watch that game,
that's the Jedi symbol, and she gets really upset as soon as she sees this symbol. So yeah, that's a theory out there that she was one of the Padawans. Obi-Wan didn't protect her. Anakin terrorized her, and she just wants her revenge on both of them. Yeah.
That's interesting. That is interesting. I think the show opens up with Reva talking to Vader directly. And we had talked about last time how she had some of the insider information, why she would kidnap Leia, or why she would refer to Vader as Anakin to Obi-Wan. And once you saw that she had that direct conversation with Vader, I was like, okay, so I guess she has some insider information. I did chuckle a little bit. The office, everyone wants to be the manager, Inquisitor now.
I thought it was more Game of Thronesy though. Like everyone's trying to go Vader's side.
She went over, so they go over her head. They're all trying to carry favor with him. So she has this conversation with him, and then Fifth Brother doesn't inform her that the droid notices Obi-Wan. This scene is interesting, also for just showing, like you said, the office politics. But behind them, they have a bunch of lightsabers, and also those kids' helmets as like trophies in the background. If you look back here, these are just like lightsabers of I guess Jedi that they've caught. So this is not just a meeting room. This is also a trophy room. It looks like you can see a little bit better here. They're all around. They're behind them as well. So there are lightsabers there as well. So it's interesting. So they're all vying for that seat with the double triangles, which seems to be the symbol for the Sith, because there's always two. So I think that's what that seat is supposed to mean. Yeah, this office politics were interesting. I don't think that she actually cares about the seat. I think she cares about something else. In this conversation, she even says that I'll get what I deserve, third sister, and so will you. And she says, I certainly hope so. But I don't think she cares about the seat. Yeah, I guess we will see what she actually cares about. Anyway, we jumped around a lot because this is an interesting episode with a lot of stuff. Did we miss anything that you guys wanted to highlight before we close out?
Most of it, though.
I think we did. I read something online which I thought was like a great way to put it, where it was like Obi-Wan's greatest fear and failure delivered the greatest episode of the series, because it's all about like Vader being like his fear and his failure. Absolutely. The fact that kind of really brought the greatest episode so far in the series.
It was a great episode. If they could keep up this and ramp up, it's going to be exceptional by the end, because we're definitely going to see another interaction or another confrontation between Vader and Obi-Wan, because I can't imagine they're going to put this in the middle and then they don't see each other again for the next 10 years. We have to have another matchup. What Vader said specifically in New Hope makes sense, which is, the last time I saw you were the master and I was a learner.
The circle is now complete. When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
Because in this matchup, he's wiping the floor with him. So so there's going to be some really big rallying that Obi-Wan is going to do by the end of the season, I assume. So yeah. All right, so that's all we have. But we are interested to hear what you guys think. So please comment down below, like and subscribe to get more content like this, and we will see you next week. All right, guys. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. May the force be with you.